All right, it is November 19th, 2024. This is round three of Uniting WordPress YouTubers, which is all about bringing people who are creating content on YouTube or wanting to create content on YouTube together to learn, connect, find similar feedback pathways and resources we can provide you all. And so this session is going to take a similar format as one of the prior ones we had with Aaron Jordan, where we'll have an open Ask Me Anything and discussion with Matías Ventura to help provide some direct connections to the project and kind of level up our collective knowledge. I wanted to share a few announcements to start. WordPress 6.7 launched last week. I'm sure you all know this. I wanted to call out that there were over 750 contributors, which is a higher number than I've seen in the past. And there's just a ton of new features, including a new default theme. I did want to call out there's a handy release page that I sometimes think people don't always necessarily find that I think is really great. I love showing audiences this. I think it's a really visual, beautiful, easy to digest page. I also want to call out that Friday will be the first office hours with Matt and Mary, who kindly joined us on this call today. Mary Hubbard is here. She's here to like learn and lurk and listen and kind of start diving into the community. So I'm really excited about that. I will be there. December 4th, I just scheduled the next call for us. It's going to be with Adam Zielinski from WordPress Playground. He's going to provide some very hands-on demos, and the aim is to see. I found it to be really powerful when creating demos and like helping educate folks and bring people along. And so it's kind of a time to both learn from him in a practical way, so you can kind of bring your audiences with you, and also to give him feedback, like what would be cool for you all to see, all that sort of good stuff. So December 4th, an invite went out. If you did not get it, let me know. Finally, for more designer side of stuff, I wanted to announce and share the announcement rather for the new design system in Figma. I think this is super cool as someone who's not a designer. This is a huge way for me to create little prototypes and mockups and to see what's the latest with our components. So I highly recommend digging in there if you're interested in building, WordPress products. If that's something on your end and you want to align with core, is a great way to get in there. And it's also just a great way to see modern WordPress. So those are my announcements. At this point, I want to just introduce Matías Ventura, designer, engineer, photographer, philosopher, and casually the project architect of Gutenberg. Thank you for joining. Do you have anything you want to say to start? Kick us off? Anything on your mind?
No, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be talking with you all and cover all the cool stuff that's going on.
Yeah. Big shout out to all you with your 6.7 videos already. We can just start with questions. Does anyone have any questions to start with? Jamie, go.
Hey, so I just put a tweet out today. It's getting tons of reaction, but I think it's quite an interesting question given where we are. And the tweet was, is it time to only have one WordPress theme? Like, agree or disagree?
Oh, the question. I think we need to clarify what that means. In a sense, I think at least on the blog themes, from the blog themes perspective, we do end up with one theme. Like it's just how to describe it. If we start adding a lot of these patterns, units, all these systems, all these the style engine, when you put all of those things together, I think like that's just one theme framework. We've had a few themes even in the community, like there was like blank canvas, different like sort of blog themes. I think block base was sort of in that vein. They are all like pushing and trying to bring all these features together. But I think the way these feedback cycles work is the best ideas of that should become part of core. And that means that core provides like one highly consistent, like that's truly like the promise behind block themes is that we have primitives that are compatible across all themes. So that to me is like what one theme means is that you have compatibilities across all of them. I think there would always be room for slightly different opinionated takes on, I don't know, if you really like Tailwind and you want to like, okay, that may not be something that core itself does, but the systems should allow you to have something like that. It was interesting also in the context of something like WooCommerce, for example. I think more plugins should have, in the case of WooCommerce, I think just a bunch of default templates, default things that default theme JSON and things that just work out of the box. That to me is also plays towards that idea of like one theme mindset. Even features that we have like block hooks, I also put them towards that category of saying like, if I activate a plugin that wants to, I don't know, a newsletter plugin that wants to add a subscribe now button to the bottom of the page or a modal in the header, whatever are all the systems that it can just work with almost any design, any theme by default. So to me, I think WordPress is kind of responsible for that, like one theme mindset. I don't think it just crystallizes in like one theme folder technically. Can even with the default themes we've been saying when we introduced, what was the first one where we did that style variations broadly? Was that
I think it was
2020?
2022.
yeah.
Yeah. Like the scope behind that was like, okay, what if like in the yearly cycles we're just releasing like new styles instead of like new themes over and over? I think in practice you still want like template variety. You want a lot of things that we don't have all the mechanisms quite yet to say when like 2025 has different home pages. We don't have the smoothest experience to set it up. Like, and so when someone activates, if they want like the blogging template, they should have a sort of a way to be able to easily say which one should be the default experience. So I think we're lacking a few things before we can say, okay, we have a sort of one theme framework. I don't know what others think. Like what was I didn't see the tweet, so I don't know what's the consensus.
Yeah. Shall I read you some of the replies? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, of course.
So I put out the question because somebody put it on I've came across it on an old post of, can't remember where I found it anyway. But these are people answering the question. So the person said we should only have one theme. Brian Cord said, fully agree. Instead of a default theme, release a new pattern library each year that works with any block theme. So instead of feeling like you need to switch your theme, you get immediate access to new high-end patterns, making each year a theme, etc. So that's kind of Kevin Geary said, I said this like a year ago and people stared at me like a goldfish. Having 80 gazillion different architectures for a WordPress website, the theme repo is not a benefit. With FSC blocks, the whole traditional theme concept is dead. I'm paraphrasing slightly. That seems to be the common consensus from the people that have kind of answered so far. Mike McAlister actually weighed in. Mike is here. Do you want to say something about this, Mike? Because you've got your own perspective, because you've got your own theme.
Yeah, thanks. We're not with Ollie, we're doing something very similar to what was proposed in that in those who have built with block themes know that like block themes aren't where the power is, right? The power is now in WordPress. Everything's in WordPress. It is the tool. And block themes are just a light layer on top of that tap into all of the design tooling in there. And so all Ollie does is builds on that concept. We stay very close, like natively with core, and we have a block theme, and then we just have pattern collections that tie into that. And then each collection is tied to a theme variation or a style variation that gives you different typography that you can mix and match. And then you throw all these patterns in there and you get thousands of different combinations. So it's not that different than what Brian was proposing.
Yeah, I think it's the way I think about it is I think there's a layer that's conceptual, and I think everyone is sort of hinting at that, which is, we're removing a lot of the more, how to put it, it's not opinionated, but like the ad hoc things that themes would do that lead users to like sort of pathways that become incompatible with others. So we're like removing those layers like one at a time. I think it's been because we've had this idea of like, oh, we should just have one theme and then library of patterns. I think every time we've tried to do it, it's been a bit too early. I think there's still like some gaps in WordPress as a framework that will still need to, and that means that to me, there's still value in having slightly different approaches for what this one thing could be, because we're still learning from all of these. Like what all is doing for onboarding, I think is really useful. What all of these things, I think, amount to showing there are slightly different takes still happening in the ecosystem. I think a lot of things are coalescing, but I don't think we're quite ready to. I think after we go through all this iteration period, then WordPress should be able to say, okay, we check all the boxes. We have something that feels robust. It might also take the shape of multiple alternative pattern libraries. I don't think we have the mechanisms just yet to really have something like that, where you can say, well, you can use course pattern library, but maybe you also have like a different one that's a bit more opinionated on certain ways, and that should like take over, and then the framework, the WordPress as a framework should just take all of those and be fine with them. It also falls down through the how we conceptualize presets on styles. We haven't like fully tackled responsive design, so I think there's still some gaps before we can fully confident jump in there. There's a raise hand, Matt.
So just from the end user's perspective, questions that I get on my YouTube channel often is, do I have to upgrade from 2024 to 2025? Right. So the end user is asking like, oh, is this a upgrade path? Like this is something new for WordPress and should I upgrade? And obviously that's a house of cards that tumbles real quick when people try to just upgrade that. So just from like giving you that feedback from the, real end user perspective, there's a lot of people that ask that question.
Yeah, and it's a very valid question. And I think that there's in many sense, I don't think like themes are really like upgrades. They should be just this year take on a style or whatever. But I think in practice, new themes are adopting newer features. I think if we look at the last 3, 4, 5 default themes, they have adopted incrementally or even like adjusted the way that they interact with WordPress as a framework. So I think in practice, the latest themes are the cleanest take on what we think is this one theme idea. This might stop at some point. I think maybe we're like a few iterations away from that really fully realizing the idea. And part of this idea is also that you can just combine patterns from everywhere. I think someone, in the comments, Jamie, you're saying about for what users needs to do. Like if a user wants to just copy a pattern and pass it and it just works, or they really like the style from someone, they just can add it, or they see a really cool template and they can just add it knowing that it's going to be compatible. That's sort of to me, the end goal of like making the whole spectrum compatible, but without, if it makes sense, without stifling creativity. I think that's the thing that WordPress as a core project needs to be mindful of, that if it puts too soon, I think like the stamp of like, okay, we're done, that closes a bit the room for creativity, and we're still seeing a lot of that still come up. So it's a bit of a balance.
I'll drop an issue into, I can actually share my screen for anyone who wants to contribute to a recent kind of discussion that came up around this. I'll just briefly show this as a side tangent while you people think of their next question. But I know Riyadh is looking into some of this as it relates to decoupling templates and thinking about them in different ways. This is very long and gets very in depth, but I'll include this in the notes and drop it in because I think it's something that would be great to have feedback on, because it's talking about like switching active front pages or templates, having things persist when the user switches themes. Like right now, if you have a custom template, you lose it when you switch themes. Mixing and matching templates from different sources. And this could be a really interesting way to unlock some of what you're describing, and like part of one of the things we have to figure out for next. So
and I think the gist of this issue specifically is to make something that's being kind of implicit, like the theme hierarchy, the way that customized templates override the theme templates, but to make that a bit more explicit and flexible. So with this idea of like, okay, you have like the active ones, you'll be able to deactivate templates from a theme. That means combine templates from other themes. This is also, I think, informed by, again, what the latest default themes wanted to do, like offer like a bunch of alternates. and then realizing there's not really like super good mechanisms in core for people to toggle between them. You can replace them, you can like, but it's a bit clunky from a user experience perspective. So I think these are the things that like I would like themes pushing core to really figure out what should be the primitives and the mechanisms that we need to get in place. And it's an evolving feedback loop.
Yeah, for sure. We do have a question from Nathan. Do you want to ask it live, or is it cool if I read it? Do you care?
Yeah, I can ask it if you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about the new zoom out view, which I really like. I really, really like it. But a few times that I've used a pattern and dropped patterns in, it's kind of invoked itself. So dropping a pattern, sometimes the zoom out view appears and sometimes it doesn't. And I have an intuition that it's to do with the size of the pattern, the space that is occupied by the pattern. And I'm just wondering if that's the intended behavior. And beyond that, I'm just wondering what the broader purpose of that view is. It feels like, if you're on a small screen like I am at the moment, it just lets you see the majority of what you're trying to design. In the block editor, I've got a pretty limited view of what I can see vertically. So yeah, first question about whether that's the intended behavior. And second one, what's the overall purpose? What's the selling point of the zoom out view? Thank you.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think it also connects a bit with what we've been discussing, because one of the challenges with Zoom Out View, and the main purpose is to allow people to get this bird's eye overview of their page so that they are thinking more in terms of patterns and less in terms of individualized blocks or details. So it's like, okay, get your main sections in place, like your header, your intro, which works really well. And it's not a novel idea. There's many other apps out there that do similar things. I think the challenge for something like Zoom Out is precisely that we don't have one singular approach to themes. You might have themes with like multiple sidebars, and then, okay, what are you really zooming out on? Like, because the sections are within the main container, but don't include the sidebars. So I think executing Zoom Out well from a framework perspective means also figuring out what are these primitives. And there's a few heuristics in core now, like if you need to designate a main element, which also has accessibility benefits and so forth. And I think that's really the role of core, is like to bring about these sort of features in a way that that really account for the flexibility of what you can have. But it puts, I think, a bit of a constraint on, or not a constraint, a challenge on how to design Zoom Out in the most adequate way. And in which cases to invoke, you said like when you drag a pattern, like there are multiple cases, even if you're using the outline, the list view, and you're dragging a section to move it, if you're fully zoomed in, sometimes it's hard to know, like, hey, you want to move these sections all the way down to the bottom. That should be also a case where like it should just invoke itself, so that if you're dragging something from list view, it zooms out, so to less you like drag it where you want to do. But it should be intelligent enough that it does it only if you're really dragging a section, if you're really like attempting something like this. I think there's a lot of ways in which we can make this more intuitive and contextual. But it does run into, again, if you test across themes, it works with varying degrees of success. So that's, I think, part of the challenge as well is, okay, we need to get the concepts right. We need to really assist and help themes integrate well with these out of the box without extra maintenance. Just the idea is that if you do things right and you mark up a theme properly, that you benefit from these tools. And we're talking about Zoom Out. This is just the first version, but it would even be cool to say, okay, Zoom Out is sort of like an extruding the size. So if you have sidebars, that the sidebar itself has its own sections. It could have its own patterns. And you could do that same rearrangement. So it's more of like how are those I don't know, like sort of Iron Man thing where you like explode the site into like the different areas and you then drag between each section. So that to me is a point of like, if we're too opinionated about themes and it's just like a single column section flat, it works. It might be easier to implement, but I think it stops some of the creativity from happening. So I think we need to go the extra mile and really figure out how to, in which cases Zoom Out is is really aiding everyone or as many users as possible. I guess the other area that zoom out to for your question about the thinking behind zoom out, it's also a bit connected with this content only write mode that we're exploring, which is essentially giving users the ability to make quick edits on text, on images, without getting bogged down into the layout primitives of how a pattern was built. That exposes you to like margins and like if you really like them with spacers and so forth. So all of these elements that a user shouldn't really like necessarily be meddling with, but a creator and also like a theme builder needs all these tools. So it's I guess also a way of bridging over the fact that we're building for so many different profiles and use cases, right? From like a blogger, end users to web professionals, all the way to enterprise customers. And it does, I think it's by now it's a foregone conclusion, like WordPress has to be excellent for all of those use cases. At least that's my perspective. It's like it cannot pick one and say, oh, we're just building for this type. It needs to figure out what are the commonalities across all of them, what are the systems that can be put in place, and then all the leverage, right? Like maybe an enterprise customer locks things down, so you only get zoom out, and you only can interact with like a high level, but you cannot get into rearranging blocks or moving things because I don't know, there are brand guidelines, there are a lot of constraints that you want to have in place. So it's kind of that sort of balance.
Can I just ask, and thank you, Rich, for your comment about the Gutenberg version being a little bit more feature rich. So Matthias, are you describing a scenario then where, let's say that I've built a page or a post, and if I was to move a pattern, perhaps the zoom out view would kind of detect that I wanted to, I was moving it quickly towards the
Yes.
top of the page. It would then invoke
Yes.
itself on the
Yes.
fly.
Yeah.
Huh,
Yeah.
That's neat. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
And whether you do it from the pattern itself or from the list view, like if you go to the list view and you start dragging something in list view and it's a top level section, it's something that we can easily detect. Oh, you're like moving something. Maybe it's even like something that is so high that it goes beyond the page. So it's easy to detect those things. But that's precisely the role of zoom out, to also be we kind of invoke it as well for styles. It's sort of a signifier of saying like, oh, you're operating at a higher level, like you want to see a few more things. So I think there are many cases in which invoking it automatically can make sense. But yeah, we have to be, has to be with good judgment as well. Like we don't want it to be jumping all over the place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I think you're next.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to chat briefly about the roadmap, or maybe even more specifically about roadmap communication, because one, a big challenge for me, and I think people in the space of creating new businesses and products in the block theme full site editing era that want to stay with core and build alongside it, is that we're kind of responsible for helping with adoption, and that we're bringing customers in and users in, and we're helping them along with like using our products, we're helping them learn this new stuff. And so we get a lot of questions about the, whatever, the shortcomings in WordPress, or why it doesn't have this, or why it doesn't have this. And, we do our best to answer these questions so that we can encourage them to stay with it. But there are things that, we're bleeding users on some simple things. And I think the situation that happens then is product companies look at that and say like, okay, well, the users are asking for this and this, if core is not going to do it, then we should build it. And I think it's very tough for us right now to know it's not super clear what's coming and what's not. And so what we should build and what we shouldn't build. And I think some of the most obvious ones are things like better navigation. Like that's my number one support request usually, is navigation is really tough.
Yeah.
And then number two is usually responsive controls. And I'm not somebody who's like, yeah, we need responsive for everything, but I do think, as far as intrinsic can get us, there's always like from every user profile, from the simple the beginners all the way up to the enterprise folks. They're all looking for something in that space. And so again, it feels like for me, I'm like, I don't want to build that because I feel like it's coming someday, hopefully, but I don't know. But again, just being able to communicate that to users, I think could be really helpful. And also just having a closer line of communication with the product people so we know, so that we can all have a unified experience at the end of this, right? It's best if we have one experience instead of 50 different ones that are all built different ways. It would just be nice to have one native experience around this. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not necessarily looking for a confirmation on these things per se, but it'd be nice to know some of these high level things if we can rely on that and if we can contribute and get involved as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I think for those two examples, I would like confidently say that those that are part of the roadmap, like core needs to do them. The timelines are a bit more tricky for especially for responsive. Navigation has been a challenging piece, I think, precisely because it needs to cover so many use cases, from people with just a few pages all the way to very complex nested navigations, including mega menus and all of those shenanigans. I think we could do, that's probably the area we could improve a lot, is giving visibility to the roadmap, both in WordPress.org. I think it's WordPress.org/roadmap or /about roadmap that we have. It's a very like faint picture. I think it broadly says like, oh, we're in like these 4 phases of Gutenberg. It doesn't really capture anything in detail and no timelines. I think we could probably do a way better job at exposing that. Most of the active, more detailed roadmap is right now captured on these GitHub overview issues. Like responsive stuff is in there. Like you might need to go a few levels down all the issues. So it's the clarity of that is something that I think we could be doing a lot better. Because I think some of your other point, like how can we make sure that these sort of customer user feedback loops get back into the product roadmap? It starts by making what's already there visible, and for people to give avenues to bring in this feedback, and sometimes this feedback could even like change the priorities of some of the things. If we get like requests or specific concrete feedback of pain points across, and the better if it spans across like end customers and enterprise and all of that stuff is really useful. We started, I didn't fully finish, but I think we started like a cleanup of some of the overviews. Right now, sort of classifying between the writing experience and the site design, site editor experience. Most of the active roadmap is on the site editor right now, not so much on the writing one. That should always, to me, give like an idea of all the active areas and things we're looking ahead of in terms of in the next 3, 6, even a year timeline. I think that should be captured in there. There might be gaps. There might also be things that are not fully fleshed out. It's more of a wish list. Like let's take responsive design. I think we've had a pretty clear idea that we want to leverage the device preview stages to allow that context to be the one that determines. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions, like even like which one should be the default. There's people that want to do mobile first design, so then it shouldn't be like mobile overwriting desktop. It should be the other way around. Should like breakpoints be customizable? How should those affect the device previews? So we know we want to get there. It hasn't seen like a full breakdown, like project breakdown into exactly what are the things that we need to implement. For navigation, I don't know if we have like the navigation overview fully up to date. There's been a recent push with the content only work to see how that reflects back on navigation, because the navigation block was built with a lot of flexibility baked into it. It also makes it one of the most challenging experiences for users, especially when you just have a few items that you just want to reorder pages. It's just feels a bit too complicated for that. But we should have that capture somewhere. there.
Cool.
I'm also like turning it back. Like, what would be things that you really like? So I know it's not very useful to tell people like, oh, you can go to GitHub and see the roadmap. It's not the easiest way to navigate to identify what is an important issue. We have like 5K issues open as well. It's not the easiest. So I think like having more clarity of this in WordPress.org, the roadmap page in WordPress.org, I think that would be the best. But it'd be good to know what people are looking for, what level of granularity is useful, at what level it gets too overwhelming. Like you probably don't want to see individual issues there. Like how much of the timeline should be reflected. If you're hoping to see something more around the releases, like yeah, 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, and so forth, or if it's like more at a higher level than that. I think that would be useful if we were to tackle that page and make it more clear.
Are you
Yeah.
able to update that? Because I can share a draft. Like, I think there, like, the feedback I've always heard is people like to see release by release. So having a tag where it's like, these are all the release posts, and then having like, these are the overview issues. This means they cut across many releases, they're being iterated on, like having that distinction. And I think if we can get better at closing out overview issues, or even just noting something that's like not active, I think that's something I see a lot is like what's actually active from these overview issues versus areas. But if someone's trying to build a product, like it is helpful to see like this is what core is doing. Patricia, I saw you raise your hand. I don't know if you want to add something related to this. You're muted, I think. Oh.
Sorry. Hi,
There we
I'm
go.
mostly an event organizer, meetup and WordCamps, and the end users are indeed asking for that kind of thing. When is that coming, or is that coming, or should I get a plugin for that? And that such kind of a list for the general public would be useful. And also, just quickly to introduce myself, I aim starting videos on YouTube and Shorts to bring all the information to general audience, and especially in other than English languages, starting with my language, which is French. So
Nice. Cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks
You
for
should,
the.
yeah. Oh,
Sorry,
keep
go
going,
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say you should talk to Barna because he does a lot of stuff in his own language, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you all could share tips. It'd be cool to have like YouTubers with a bunch of different languages, and like what we can learn to make that more the feedback more accessible for folks who cannot comment in English. That was a big thing with the outreach program that I learned, was having people who could be connectors there was huge. So please
Barna
continue that.
is in Hungary, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. And just because all the tech people are here, I just wanted to ask something that I got across being part of the Gather Press team. There was a how to say, when a plugin has a block, give give a block. I mean, it's listed on the plugin page that this plugin has this block or this one. And the question was from one of the dev who asked if there is block variation instead of creating a new block, if that could be listed also in the plugin repository at some point. Maybe I can give you the track ticket here. And because that's an information also for the end user, like, is that something that is included and given by the plugin? So that would be useful. If there is anything coming, yeah, same then with the features. Sometimes we don't know, especially for people like me who are not developers or too techy. Yeah, what is coming, when is coming, what is possible, what can we ask, where to ask, and that kind of thing. And just I have just a small thing to say about something you said, Anne, at the beginning of the call. We had a lot of people on this release because I was also part of the contributor mentorship program as a mentor and facilitator, and we encourage a lot our mentees to come and test. So that was a lot of people who who helped for that release. So
Well, thank you very much for all of that. Let me see. So for the first question, I think it was about responsive design and timelines and so forth. I think we could say we have like a decent idea of where we want to go. I would say that we could have it like next year in core. I think we can commit to that. Maybe even like towards beginning of the like in the first quarter of the year or second quarter could be. Well, do we have the releases already? The timeline for the releases? Like probably not on the next release, but in the following one, we could have something. For blog variations on plugin page, I think that's a great idea. Like we could right now, like the listing of blogs on plugins is determined by the blog JSON presence. So if it doesn't work for variations, we should look into that or a way to expose that. I think there's a lot of work to improve the connective tissue between plugin directory and theme directory and some of these features. And now we added like displaying patterns that can bundle with a theme. But I think we're like still scratching the surface of how much usefulness we can bring and how much clarity we can bring to users on that.
Mike, back to you.
I just wanted to just a quick rewind and follow up on the stuff like navigation and responsive. These are huge issues, and I get that's why they end up taking a long time and there's a lot of consideration. But I do wonder if there's like within those big issues, if there's smaller things we can attack that help us float to the bigger issues. For example, like navigation, right? That's a big thing architecturally and everything. But then there's little things like, why can't I change the hover color on my links in the navigation?
Yeah.
Right. That's such a like for an end
Yes.
user, that seems like a simple and like silly thing that they're like, this doesn't feel right and this is broken, you know?
Yeah.
Or responsive,
Yeah.
it's like, can't we just filter can I change where this folds down to 2 columns? You know, can I filter the breakpoints in theme JSON?
Yeah.
So there's things like that where I feel like, and this I think takes maybe more granular product management to suss out those things, to understand at the user level what is most important. But I think you know, just in terms, it seems like this is our kind of posture moving forward in WordPress is like big initiatives and lots of work, but at the end of the day, it's incredible when it comes out. And so figuring out how to get those little bits out to users and drip them along to keep them in our system and keep acquiring new users while we're working on these big things, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges in how to develop WordPress, because I think so for example, for the navigation, there's a whole list in the overview issue of things that we need to do, like the current highlight of the current menu item. You should be able to customize that. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, we need to support it on theme JSON, but we also need a UI for it. Once we commit to theme JSON, we know that, okay, we will need to maintain this forever. So I think the balance there is in some things seem like, oh, we know there's a big project coming in. We could give, even for the navigation, we have like a arbitrary breakpoint for when it collapses into a hamburger menu. Like, yeah, that should be like filterable, set by a theme. But we also know that's not the right solution. So if we open it up as a filter, okay, now we need to support that filter forever in WordPress. And it starts to couple us to certain decisions that may not be right, or it may not be the most ergonomic. So that's the balance. That's not to say that there's probably a lot of relatively low-hanging fruit that we could be spearheading more. Some of that, sometimes it's like, okay, it's not captured as an issue, or sometimes it is captured, but it just falls through the cracks of everything else. Some of these could be like great first candidate for new contributors to pick up. There's been a lot of those. Some do become a bit more rabbit holes when you start looking into them. It's like, okay, we expose these and you can modify it by a filter. Should we also allow a interface to modify it? How do we represent all of these things? And then it starts to balloon into a point where like, okay, maybe we should just solve the root problem properly. so that we're not carrying so much maintenance cost and legacy debt and so forth. I think that's the biggest challenge because it also sometimes prevents us from trying things. Like sometimes we may not be quite sure what the solution is, but we can say, well, let's get this out there, see if it works. But getting this out there, we cannot do that in WordPress core because getting anything out there has backwards compatibility concerns. We can do more of that with a Gutenberg plugin. That's why we have a bunch of experiments. And that could be something if there's like appetite for, oh, we want early access to some of these responsive controls with the mindset of giving feedback, knowing that this is subject to change. So it should only be done by people that are okay with keeping up with the changes, because otherwise users are going to suffer. I think that's largely the balance. It's not so much that we don't want or we cannot do things incrementally, is that even with incremental things, you're committing to things almost forever. So you have to be pretty sure that it's at least in the direction that we want to go, to avoid carrying forward, a bunch of things that then things need to adapt or change, or that creates this situation where, like, depending on what thing you're using, you get access to different things, which takes us away from the idea of the like one theme. I had a bit of a lag spike. It takes you away from this idea of one theme if we end up with like these variations of adoptions. But that's I think I would say maybe it's an ongoing, or like keep pushing back on things that you think like, oh, this could be done sooner. There's like, hover effects on navigation block. Like, we have most of the pieces. Some of this stuff is supported on theme.json, but not exposed in the interface. Some of this stuff shouldn't need, I know for hover states, we have like a whole overview issue about handling states in a broad sense, capturing, because, okay, once we start supporting something, it's like, okay, that should open up to other pseudo selectors and focus areas and so forth. But it's easy for that to balloon into too much work up front, and then nothing happens for a while. That's sort of the landscape. I know it's like it's a bit tricky, but I think that's also part of the challenge that WordPress contributors have on themselves. It's like everyone wants to be able to move iteratively and push things out there, but we also need some certainty that it's going in the right direction because of the maintenance cost associated with it. That's why to me it's also super cool to see block libraries explore the problem space, because they can move faster, they can make now there's a lot of block libraries that have implemented responsive controls. So it's good to see, okay, this might work, this might not work. Even in the recent one, there was some activity on people also coming to the idea of like, oh, we should be using the device preview to signal what is customizable. It's good to see this sort of the ecosystem pushing the boundaries, because that then feeds back into like, okay, we know now that what the right path is, and then we can start getting into like iterations towards there. Also think like we're not always going to get that right despite the best efforts. So again, the pushback on like, well, I think there's stuff in navigation that we could do before we tackle, like, that's always helpful to hear about those. And like sometimes even like what is a bigger pain point, and in some cases it might even be, okay, core is okay taking on some maintenance costs, knowing that this would fix or address a significant problem today. And I would say like, okay, we'll take the maintenance backwards compatibility cost in some of those cases.
Cool. Thanks, Matías. I know this is like probably the most complicated era in WordPress development because of how big everything is, and this transition is just still, it's so massive. So I appreciate your thoughts there. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Yeah.
I do want to call it just because sometimes I used to think Matías was two people, but the pronunciation is, unless I'm getting it wrong this whole time, it's Matías. But I used to think there were two different people called Matías and Matías, and I was like, who are these? Like, I need to get them in the room together, and then I realized it was the same.
Yeah.
So I just
it's Matías, but I really don't mind it.
Okay.
Yes.
What other questions? I'd be curious now. Oh, you should chime in. Go. I get to talk to him all the time.
This is my first call, I guess, and I hope to join in on the future ones. I work for Katie Keith, Barn 2 Plugins, and I came on 2 years ago to start that role. Um, Basically, I have had pretty, I would say, minimal involvement in the core project and understanding what's going on there. I'm just on the outskirts, I'm on the sidelines. I'm basically like a newbie as well. I mean, 2 years is also not a lot of time, but I felt like a little bit of a almost that imposter syndrome feeling, sometimes where I'm like, okay, I kind of know
Mhm.
what I'm doing, but I don't really know what I'm doing. So lately, I've taken it upon myself to learn more about like everything that's going on with WordPress, of course. But I was doing some courses which were using block themes and everything. I think I was using the Ollie theme last time, Mike, which was cool. But yeah, do you have any specific places I should be keeping tabs on, like either like forum for reading or where the community is talking the most about this sort of stuff, or perhaps just some other educational materials where I can actually like really learn this stuff properly so I can teach it too.
That's a great question. I think Jamie can probably answer that better than I. But I
Mhm.
think broadly, like all of you, all of the YouTubers and people creating content is, I think that seems to be where people are learning the most these days. So I think that's
Hmm.
a huge impact and potential for the WordPress community as a whole. But yeah,
Hmm.
Jamie, I don't know if you want to add like something more specifically there.
Well, a few people have said learnwordpress.org, which is fantastic. They've got some great in-depth courses on there.
Hmm.
You should also, I know you follow me on YouTube, but I've done a whole
Yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of, yeah, so I don't need to say that. But you should also follow Elliot Richmond on YouTube. He does some great stuff at the moment. He's doing some good work. And actually, I don't really talk about this, but I run a Facebook group, which is a Gutenberg community Facebook group. We've got about 1,600 members now. So there's loads of discussion in there as well. So there's kind of three good places. Um, and then most of the people on this screen, you should follow them if you're not already following them on X or Blue Sky or where people hanging around at the moment. What else? What
Yeah.
else? What else? Oh yeah,
I
post
do want to
status.
call
Oh, make
also
WordPress
just
Slack as well.
because, yeah, make WordPress Slack. I was like, let's just think about the community and the feedback loop. Like Nick Diego called out the outreach channel, which is like a variation. It started just around like the site editor and it's moved into like general outreach. And it's a great place. I think it's almost 1,000 members and it's in the WordPress org community. You're working with people who are building the features. Like it's a great feedback loop. Announcements are made around like developer hours and like ways that you can learn live with folks like Nick or Jamie. So I definitely recommend jumping into the WordPress org Slack and that outreach space in particular. And you're welcome to, I'll DM you my email address. You
Mhm.
probably have it just in the counter, but anything we can do to follow up and any specifics you have too, I'm happy to be a person in there. Sometimes it helps to
Okay,
ping a
cool.
person and get
There's
some more
also
specifics. So.
a really great site is if you want to keep up with stuff, Gutenberg Times is fantastic. So go and follow that. It's an incredible site. And also Carolina's site. And I can't remember it's fullsiteediting.com, I think, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
exactly
That's a great site to go and check out. She's got some great stuff on there. Nathan's put Frank's site. He's more of I think his stuff is more of development stuff. So I'm not sure that would be right in your sweet spot. There's other ones. And then the final thing to say is start building. I would just start building with block themes. That's a great way to
Yeah.
learn. Spin up a playground site.
Yep.
If you don't know Playground, go and check out Playground. You can spin up sites for free in 1 second and just start trying to recreate some stuff. That's the best way to learn, in my view.
Mm. Yeah, no, thanks. It's like the awareness of these things perhaps isn't the issue. It's more just like, yeah, knowing where to start, I guess, is a little bit
Yeah.
tricky. But I like that advice for just spinning up sites and starting. I think the other side of it is that a lot of people have come from a professional building background, designing background, where
Mhm.
they've had clients that they've worked with specifically. And I think that's what's been mostly lacking in my background. And I'm wondering if I just need to sort of like take on some projects if that's learn through exposure or something like that. Because it's fun to spin up a site in a few seconds, but then if it's not for any particular purpose, you're not exactly learning. Yeah, what
Just
depends.
remember that the people you do it for free will be the hardest customers you've ever had in your life.
Fair enough.
Unless you set it up right, I will say, I think that is like a really good, I just built a site for someone. And I told them like, I can't get paid because I work for Automatic, and also I'm doing it partially to get the feedback and find the bugs. But the intent is to hand it off. And honestly, with the site editor, the person I made it for was like, I want direct access to my site. I am just trying to update when I have like shows coming up. And to be able to be
Wasn't
like,
that your
here's a 2-minute video, here you
wasn't that
go.
your
And
dad?
like,
Wasn't that your
this is
dad,
actually
Diane?
for a comedian. This is actually not a family member, which is cool. So this is actually just for a comedian,
Yes.
a podcaster I follow. I reached out to her and was like, hey, I see your site's on WordPress. And that's a great way to get started, is if you see a simple site or you see something that you think you could do, and
Yeah.
just setting the parameters up where it's like, I'll upgrade you to the latest,
Yeah.
but I can't get involved. I try to regularly do that a couple of times a year, or as much
Yeah.
as I can.
Yeah, I think in the subject of imposter syndrome, I think the way I see it is like, if you're feeling that, you're probably in the right place because you're learning stuff. And that's it. That's it. The way I started with WordPress was just like trying to hack a WordPress theme like in 2003. And that's how I think a lot of us like got started, was just like, it's one of the beauties of WordPress that it's open source. You can go to the store and start tweaking things and like, I don't know, tear down a blog, like try to piece it together in a blog theme, and that starts to get you in the path of learning. Which is also, I think, another, like, maybe it's not like a primary goal of what we're doing, but I think it's a think we all should be thinking about the roadmap and the things we do as an education layer. Like, we have blogs that are complex, like the query block, and I think those are like gateways to understanding how WordPress works. And they can be educational tools for users that, oh, like, what is this query thing? And they start tweaking it, and maybe something starts to work funkily, but they are learning something about how WordPress works. And I think that openness is that balance between, like, there are going to be areas that are a bit more challenging. There are areas that are challenging just because we haven't got them right, like navigation, that shouldn't be challenging. But there's other ones that I think, like, yeah, they come with a like slightly higher learning curve. Like, yeah, you need to understand what the loop is, what queries are, what like taxonomies and stuff like that. Even the theme hierarchy, if you start like messing with a blog theme, you start understanding like, oh, what are templates and how they relate to the permalinks on the website. And all of those things, I think, like, are learning avenues that is really, to me, one of the biggest beauties of WordPress, is that it can really onboard new people and make them, they go from a user to a professional web developer. Like, that's a completely valid path that we need to, I think we should still honor and respect.
I think just to tie into what everyone else was saying about building kind of a practical site, is there is so much value in that. So if you don't have a site, if you build your personal site or something, or build a fake marketing site, or pick a nonprofit and build one of those, because not only are you going to learn the different tools like the blocks and things like that, but there is a paradigm that comes with all of this that is still very new. And that is like how the site editor ties to patterns, ties to synced patterns, how you hop from the edit screen into editing a template part and getting out of that. And so all of that is new and learned, and everyone's learning that. And it also changes the way you build a site from the very beginning, in my opinion. Once you know how this all works, you build sites differently than we used to in WordPress. Like with synced patterns, for example, those are very powerful. And if you lean on those from the very beginning, it changes the way you build out your website, because you can lean on these components and then set those up for, site-wide changes later on. So you really do have to, and that's why I encourage everyone to do it. I think Matt Mullenweg should be building a few sites a year as well. Everyone should be, because
Yeah.
it's the experience that real people have, and we should have that experience and know it, so we know the pitfalls along the way. So it's a very valuable experiment. You can find some time to do it.
Yeah. I guess that Jamie, the speed builds there to me have been like really fun to see as well, especially seeing, like, I think different people taking different approaches with the same tools, that's also always like, you can see, oh, there's multiple ways to do the same thing, and you can carve your own path there. It's fun.
So is that you want to come on one?
I think it's a Matt on the hook still for one of those.
He is still on the hook. Yeah.
Matt versus
I'd love
Matías.
to
That
see
would
that.
be funny.
Oh, that would be awesome. Let's do that.
Just put it out there.
Now, we
Just
need
put it out
we need
there.
to make it fair. We need to make it fair. Like,
I remember at WordCamp Europe, Jessica Lishik challenged Matt to do that.
yes.
And he said, Matthias, you have to train me or something like that.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
and
need to
she
train
asked
him.
again at
Yeah,
WordCamp US, I think.
So-
I think he got thrown the gauntlet again.
Did.
yeah.
If
love
if
that.
anybody's in London on the 12th of December, then
Cool.
you can watch Jamie Marsland in a speed build. I'm putting him against Dan
Oh,
Maybe.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're going to do Ling's cars. We're not doing Ling's cars. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jamie's
Nice.
finally being subjected to his own.
Finally.
He is exactly that.
Mm.
Yeah. And he's got
Yeah.
to wear boxing gloves, but he doesn't know that yet.
Amazing.
I wanted to add something for Sam. I know very well the imposter syndrome, and don't worry about it. I think at some point a lot of people have
Yes.
been through that. I can relate a lot, and especially this kind of calls. Like 5 years ago, I would never have dared to come on. So, yeah, don't worry.
I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah, my English at the time, and also like, oh, they are all developers. I'm only like community engagement event organizer, and which of course, I mean, in 23, I was in a panel how to contribute to WordPress without knowing how to code, but still, I mean, to join a developer team and stuff like that, it would have been too much, and now I'm feeling good. So same for you. It depends. Also, it depends what you want to learn about your other question. What you want to learn. If you want to learn development things, so you add all the links that the other people gave you here in chat. But for example, for me, I became the translator of podcasts, a WP podcast, which is done since 4 years in Spanish originally. And at some point, other languages were added, and I translated. And in the beginning, what do I translate about? I don't understand. So it's basically the news of what happened in the WordPress world in the last week. It's done in the original in Spanish by Javier Casares, and is following everything what happened in all the teams. And then I translate, and I learned a lot of things. And even the thing that I was talking that Mike was talking about before. I mean, what is coming up? These are the kind of things then I can share. For example, at the meetups I co-organize, So you know a lot of things that are going to happen. What is going to be in the next release and stuff like that. And I learn a lot of things about words that I would never have heard of, like block bindings and some APIs that were like very mysterious to me or stuff like that. So,
Yeah. That's a great call. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, we're
Thank you,
at the
Patricia.
time, but I did want to wrap on that. I think that's a great note to end on, like talking about imposter syndrome and also thinking about the future of these calls. Like that's part of the intent. We're doing like different AMAs. I'm trying to do some practical stuff, but we also, part of the point of these calls is to share some of like, here's what's coming up and here's what's coming next, as part of a continuation of some of the stuff that was done with the FSC Outreach program back in the day. I also want to shout out, I'm going to shout my own thing, but there is I do Sources of Truth each year, and that's now going to be on the Gutenberg Times, and there's going to be a crew of folks that will help me with it. But that kind of gives you a rundown of everything too, which I honestly reference it myself. But yeah, so in the future, if there's areas, Sam, that you would like to see, and if anyone here would like to see, let's do a deep dive. These calls are for you all and for us to kind of have this feedback loop with the folks that you reach out to. So yeah, I think to me, this is one of the most exciting times to be at WordPress. I'm really looking forward to everything that's coming up. I think we need to be talking about it more, and not just with you all, but then all of you with the broader circles. I don't think many people
in the wider industry world like are aware of everything that's coming up in WordPress. And I think it's some of the most exciting stuff on the web these days. So we should be talking about that more.
I totally agree. I think that's where this is going to be a cool avenue for that. So thanks for pulling back some of the behind the scenes for that today, Matías. And thanks everyone for joining,
Well,
as always.
Thanks for thanks for having me and for all the questions. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Awesome. Bye, y'all.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye bye.